thank you all for tuning in for our second program, which I'm really excited about because we have a really up and coming young man who is part of the World Affairs Council Young Professionals Committee and has really added a significant value to the organization and to that committee. And he'll be introducing our board chair, who will be speaking about her career, about her experiences in government and in the corporate world, and everything else that Wayne asks her about. But she has been an instrumental part of the organization, and I'm not just saying that because she hired me. She's also a fellow Bruin, so you know we always have to throw that in there. But she's a very passionate, and I'm not going to steal Wayne's thunder of her bio, but I just wanted to say how blessed the organization is to have the guidance and leadership from Patricia, and I'm really looking forward to your conversation with each other, and we'll let you know, Wayne, if there are any questions or comments from Facebook. We'll text that to you or put it in your chat room, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks, Armin.
Without further ado, I want to introduce Wayne Smith, who's with the CoStar Group, and you'll find his link of not only that and other experiences in his LinkedIn bio that Samantha's sharing right now on our Facebook page. And he's also part of the Young Professionals Committee, who have really done a great job to get the word out about the World Affairs Council, to put on some great programs and some really good vision for what's to come for the rest of 2020 and 2021. So Wayne, please take it away, and I will see you all in about 30 or 40 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Armin. I appreciate that. I'm going to try and live up to the intro that you gave me there. Well, so today my guest is Patricia Diaz Dennis, who, as Armin mentioned, is the current chair of the World Affairs Council and has done an incredible job. She's not paying me to say that. So I want to give a little brief background about you. I know that the bio is going to be included, and then we'll just kind of jump into questions about being a Latina in leadership and your very storied career that I'm excited to hear more about. So Patricia, you are from New Mexico, and then you attended UCLA and then went to Loyola Law School. So your background is as an attorney. And then Patricia, after being an attorney, was appointed to what's the way we call it? There we go. And she was appointed to the National Labor Relations Board. And then in the 90s, by President Bush, was appointed to the Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs. So two presidential appointments under two different presidents. Three. Oh, I missed one. Okay, so give me the third one.
President Reagan appointed me to a Democratic seat on the Federal Communications Commission. So, you know, all the agencies are composed of, let's say it's a 5-person agency, 3 of the president's party and then 2 of the other. So for the Labor Board and for the FCC, I was one of the others. I was a Democrat in a Republican administration, essentially.
Sure,
but they're independent agencies. So
Right. So, I mean, a very, very storied career, 3 presidential appointments.
Thanks.
Yeah. After that, you were a VP at, or I think before that, you were a VP with Sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And then went and did your the presidential appointment under President Bush. And then once you left the State Department, you joined SBC Communications as a VP. And you've been involved in various nonprofits, World Affairs Council, Girl Scouts of America, all sorts of really fun stuff. So I have personally really enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of years in our chats at World Affairs Council events. And so yeah, I want to just kind of jump into the first question I have for you about being Latina and being in the positions that you have been in. So the first question is, throughout your career, whether it's the private sector or in a presidential appointment, more of a political setting, how has being Latina shaped your experience in any of those settings?
Well, we all have expectations of others. Unfortunately, some of them negative. And usually at the law firms, when I got out of law school, I was the first woman, first Latina. And so there were certain expectations, and people would make comments that, to me, that told me they had a certain stereotype in mind. And so one of the things that I guess has sort of always propelled me is to blast the stereotypes, change the stereotypes, because the perspective is, or at least in the law firms I was in at the beginning of my career, way back in the prehistoric period, Wayne, of 1973, when there were only about 6 or 7% women graduating from law school, was that we were overly emotional. There was an article I remember written when I was finally confirmed by the Senate and going off to Washington from my job in Los Angeles. I was with ABC at the time. And it was sort of, among Latinas, she's, dressing well, speaks English well. It was a kind of a negative backhanded way of saying, wow, she speaks English, she's educated. And again, it was, I guess it propelled me to really want to do the very best I could. I've always worked hard. It's one of the great things about this country was, for a long time at least, you could work hard and change your life. I'm the daughter of Porfirio Diaz and Mary Maria Diaz, and Dad was a sergeant in the Army. Neither one of them went to college. I was the first to go to college in my family. And what a great story it is that somebody like me was plucked from obscurity by President Reagan, really. I'd practiced labor law 10 years by then, and thrust into the labor board, where I was making decisions that really affected a lot of workers and employers in this country. So I took it, I guess being Latina, it just gave me more sensitivity and desire to do well, because I wanted the door that had opened for me to be left open. I wanted to swing it open and bring a lot of others in. And hence, that's why I've been active in a lot of nonprofits, because I do believe in making the world a better place. And Girl Scouts, we got a lot of young little Latinas in Girl Scouting when I was chair of the board for 3 years and on the board for 9, because it taught them courage and confidence and character. And with those three, and community service, the fourth C. And so with that background, with that buildup, that strengthening that you get in a youth serving organization like Girl Scouts, you can go on and be anything you want. My parents, like a lot of Latino parents of their generation, really put everything into my brother. I'm the oldest of 4, but my brother, another Porfirio, was the one they really set their sights on. And I worked my way through college. Really, I have a funny story, though. I'm digressing a bit here, Wayne, but it's a true story. When I was appointed my parents are lifelong Democrats. And when I was appointed by President Reagan to the labor board, my parents were not as impressed as I wanted them to be. I was 36 years old. I'd been confirmed by the Senate. I was pretty proud of what I had achieved, right? And Mom and Dad just weren't having it. They just weren't beside themselves like I was about this magnificent thing that had happened to me and the move to Washington, D.C. from California. We were living in LA then. And so I invited them back. My grandmother flew on a plane for the first time. They came back for my swearing in. And Mom and Dad, they got to meet then Vice President H.W. Bush, got a tour of the White House. The Secretary of Labor swore me in at the old executive office building. It was a big deal. Still weren't impressed. We went back to the labor board, to my office, and I had the assistant had separated all the personnel files. Each board member oversees 35 lawyers. And she had segregated the files into GS levels, government service levels. Now, my mom was a GS5 because she was a clerical at White Sands. I'm a native New Mexican, as you said. And then my dad retired as a sergeant in the Army. And my mother saw the little stickies on there and it said GS 15 and 14 and so on. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you supervising GS 15s?" I said, "Yeah, Mom. And I have a few SESs too, right? Even higher." She turned to my dad and she said, "Oh, Porfirio, this is an important job." You know, what it told me though is you need to explain things to people in their language, right? So that they have a deeper understanding.
Yeah.
You know, Mom just didn't get what all of it was about, but she got that I was supervising GS 15s. It made a big difference. And finally they were proud.
You're like, here we go. Yeah. That's a great story. Yeah.
Just all kinds of, I mean, I was told my hair was too curly. It's pulled back today, but I haven't had very curly hair until it started getting a little grayer. I think the hardest thing for women, especially even today, because we give lip service to having family-friendly policies in this country, but we don't. And so when I started having children too, it became even more difficult, I think, to juggle all the demands of work and home life. You know, I have three adult children and 3 grandchildren. And I still think it's very extra hard for women and for men who choose to work at home and be the primary child carer, you know.
Right.
Our society is not accepting of that. And I'm hoping that before I die, I'll get to see that change.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's incredible. And I actually have a follow-up question to that. So you had mentioned that in these settings, which I think is still very relevant today, where people would say things in a somewhat backhanded way, or maybe just not even know the correct protocol, just, you know, out of ignorance, perhaps. What was your response to that? I'm sure, you know, being the age you were and being in such an accomplished position, especially during a presidential appointment, you know, like you're feeling on top of the world, and to still kind of receive that, I just want to hear your perspective.
Well, you know, it depends where you are in your career journey, I think. When I was younger, I tried to maintain a sense of humor. Humor can diffuse really difficult situations, but you got to know your audience too, and how far you can push things. I've made some mistakes along that way. But as I've gotten even older, and I heard this once, and it's true, women become more radical as they age because you just don't take it quite the same. And especially when I was in a position where I could just counter it, say, "I'm sorry, that's not my world," you know, or "That's not what I think." Or I just found out, by the way, I'm 30% Native American from my 23andMe. And my grandpa always used to say that his mother was full-blooded Apache. We didn't know her. And we thought he was probably exaggerating, but now we find out he wasn't.
He was not exaggerating. Wow. Okay.
And then my husband, when he found that out, he said, "Oh, that explains everything." So, you know, my roots are in that part of New Mexico that was Mexico. Well, that whole state was Mexico, but that's where the various tribes of Apaches lived.
Right.
And so, you know, it always, again, I sort of let people know, hey, you know what? We weren't the immigrants. And this belief that until the Europeans came, that somehow this country wasn't settled.
Right.
I take up now. I disabuse people of that because I think we don't study that in our history.
Right.
And people don't know what the real history is of this country, and that indeed many peoples lived in it way before Spaniards and English came. And, you know, I don't want to emphasize divisiveness because we're in way too divisive a time now. But I just want people to understand that what has made this country so great was this grand experiment where we'd take all these different kinds of cultures and backgrounds and mix it all up and become American. To me,
Right.
grand experiment. It hopefully will have it continue to work.
Right. Yeah. And to speak to something that you just mentioned, and I'm sorry with all the follow-up questions, but you're just very
Oh,
interesting.
please do.
Is,
Flattering, Wayne. If somebody cares, my kids would go, "Oh, Mom,"
During, you mentioned during the spiel about the sitting on the board, and it would be a 2-1 split with 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Coming from a family of Democrats, and also what you just mentioned, the divisiveness in our current political environment. What differences do you see then compared to our current political climate now when it came to working across? I mean, Reagan was called the great communicator, and so I feel like we've strayed from that. What side of the aisle you fall on, I think we can all recognize that. And so what are some of the key differences that you saw?
You bring up a really good point. The willingness to walk across the aisle. Tip O'Neill, big Democrat, right? And President Reagan would have breakfast together, work out things, decide what bills they're going to pass. A kindness that pervaded. I mean, politics has always been kind of brutal. I mean, you read things about even from George Washington on down, right? It's a brutal sport in many ways, but people of goodwill can bridge differences and find solutions that work for the country as a whole. And we have lost that. We've lost, I think, the kindness with which people would address each other, and so critical. I don't care what setting you're in. And there's no real Democrat or Republican point of view on sort of major things. And it's just, how do you get there? How do you get there? And the big debate, we've had it forever, how big should the federal government, how much should the federal government decide things, state government decide things, how much private industry. I watched something. I am worried about the state of our democracy. We don't have enough people voting. We don't have enough people caring, irrespective of where they end up on their views, and also wanting to learn about opposing views. It's just so important. When we would meet as decision makers, whether it was on the FCC or the State Department or the Labor Board, would really be forced, and I assume the Supreme Court acts this way too in all courts. You sit around and you discuss where you want to end up on the decision and how you're going to get there. And what I think is really important is called reasoning forward. Not decide beforehand, this is where I want to go, so I'm going to reason backwards and figure out a way to get me there, but reason forward. Here's the facts, this very lawyer-like. Here's the data. Where does that lead me? Not a preordained result, so that you have an open mind. And no one has a perfect solution. No one has. I tell my grandchildren that their grandma knows best. But there's many ways to solve some problems. And we don't give each other the ability to sort of talk through things and listen. Listening is such a rare gift that some people have, right? Listening well. It's one thing that I am working on still. It takes, great patience.
It's a never-ending pursuit, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and I know you were being modest earlier because you had talked about giving your appointment. You were, picked from relative obscurity.
Actually.
Well, I just want to ask the question. Regardless of modesty aside, you are very accomplished. Not just as a woman or as a Latina, you are a very accomplished person. And I want to ask you where your drive came from, to come from the background that you described with your parents. And was there ever some kind of moment in yourself where you realized younger on, I am in a and I'm going to work. Obviously, you didn't have a chip on your shoulder because of it. It seems like you worked all the harder because of it. But did you ever have that conscious realization, or was this just something like, hey, I'm just a hard worker all the time, and I'm going to accomplish things, and I'm going to get picked as 36 years old for a presidential appointment?
That really came out of the blue, and it's a demonstration of the greatness of our country. That what happened was a young associate at the law firm I started with in Los Angeles. I took pity on him, and I used to make tacos every Friday night, salsa from scratch and everything, and I'd invite him over. And we became good. I kind of mothered him a bit, and I also did something really important. You've got to marry or you choose your life partner as somebody who will support you. And my husband is the one who suggested law school to me. I would never, ever, because I didn't know lawyers. They weren't in my worldview. I had no idea. I wanted to be a teacher. It was kind of the highest level of for me to reach. I just loved I love learning. I don't know that. I don't know why. I love reading and learning even as a young child. And a love of learning is really critical too, to foster that in your children and to keep learning. We all have to keep learning now. I mean, hell, these, these devices, just the operating systems keep changing, right? And
Right.
Oh man, I have to get my daughter in to show me, okay, how do I deal with this now? But so a love of learning. And anyway, he had gone to law school with a guy who was in a big firm in Houston, and the guy in Houston wasn't real happy with somebody they were going to appoint to the labor board from his firm. So he called this young associate at my law firm and said, we're looking for a Democrat to appoint to the labor board. They'd love a woman. Do you know of anyone? And my friend said, oh yeah, I've got the perfect person. And I was appointed within 3 weeks. I mean, I got a call from the White House, presidential personnel right away. I had sent my resume in. And
Wow.
the question that the presidential personnel person asked me was, how would you feel being appointed by a Republican president? And I said, greatly honored. I'm in a presidential appointments, you're greatly honored no matter the party. And I guess that was the right answer. Because she asked me a lot of follow-up questions about the labor board. I was doing traditional labor at ABC, American Broadcasting Company. And when it was ABC, it wasn't owned by any other company. And that to me demonstrates you've got to be kind. My kindness to this, and I've remained friends with him all these years. He's a partner at a big firm in LA now. And if I had not been kind to him and he hadn't worked with me, so he knew what my work was like, it would never have happened. Serendipity. Life is full of serendipity. And that is why I just think certain character traits are ones that stand you in good stead no matter what, no matter where your journey lies. And I don't think we have a lot of ability to kind of steer the ship exactly where we want, because serendipity does enter in, right? And you're going to go careening off in another way. And I always tell people, focus on what you're doing now and do the very best at it you can. And the next job will take care of itself, because a lot of people just sort of, oh, I'm going to get there, but then don't pay a lot of attention on the path that they're following at the time. And the labor board, I did not get along with the chairman of the board, and kind of my I guess my gift from the White House was to see if I wanted to go to the FCC when my term ended on the labor board, because I did not want to have another term on it, and because it was very, very contentious and difficult. And I had another baby. I had my third child when I was on the labor board. A lot of bad jokes being on the labor board and being the only board member in the history of the agency to be pregnant while on so I mean, it was great. I've got some wonderful memories, but some really difficult ones too. The culture is still one where women I think, and especially in the 70s and 80s, but and still now, we're not allowed to be moms if you're working. People assume that you got to show you're tough. I never did that. I always allowed my staff and people I worked with to leave early for the games, it doesn't matter when you get the work done. It just doesn't matter as long as you get it done by the ultimate due date, right?
Right.
We have enough of that. We just don't, as I say, I think we don't have policies anywhere really that allow parents, men and women, and our society would be so much stronger
Right.
if parents could really parent.
Yes.
Could take the time. It'd benefit America,
I completely wholeheartedly agree with you. More time with parents is always beneficial. I have a question that came in from the audience that I want to make sure I ask before I forget.
Okay.
There's another one that just popped up right now. So I'll ask you both. The first one is, do you have an influential Latina leader throughout history that you have looked to as an inspiration for your own leadership styles?
That's a really good question. Honestly, in life, my mentors have been primarily men, because that's who I worked with. Being the first woman at a particular place, that's who you end up with. And my best mentor has been my husband. That is a question. We don't know enough stories about the women who went before. And there's a great project that a friend of mine in Denver has done, and it's called Luminarias de la Ley. And it's about first women lawyers. I'm included because in the 70s, there weren't that many Latinas going to law school, but we don't know their stories. And I didn't know their stories growing up. She's going to do a book as well, but she's done a timeline and she's taken it around. I helped her to get law schools interested so that Latinas today in law school can see their forebears, the ones who came before, the ones who lit the way, and we need more of that. That is, I think, one of the things that I so cherish about today is that we're learning about all these women, like the women at NASA, the 3 African-American women who helped get us up in space, or there was a movie I watched the other day about Harriet Tubman. There's just the stories that now are being told and being exposed young children. I bought all these books for my granddaughter too, about here's all the great famous women in X field, medicine and law and social work, whatever, because we just didn't know them, and I didn't know them growing up. So know that honestly, and it makes me sad to say it, there was nobody I could look to. I mean, I just sort of felt my way, and there was no real model. I had a lot of bad models, women who would have the baby and go back to work right away, and I wanted to nurse. So I stayed home 3 months with each baby. My Alicia, my baby, the one at the labor board, because you couldn't take time off, right? So I brought her to the office, and you didn't see people in that except your staff people, and so it worked out pretty darn well. She was better than a lot of the adults I worked with in the office. But no, that's I'm going to have to do some thinking about why I didn't invest. It just, life. It's so difficult balancing all those balls, and you do every day balance different ones, and you never get to equipoise. I call it managing, your personal and your professional life. I don't call it balancing, because you never get into balance, really.
There's no perfect balance. Yeah.
There really isn't. It's just managing each day. And I tell people, when you got all these balls you're balancing, try not to drop the family one very often, because it's more fragile than the rest and it will break. And so that's why I really believe that we should be, as a country and all workplaces, be much more forgiving of whomever it is that has children, or a parent to care for, or whatever it is. I mean, responsibility for others in their family, to be a lot more flexible
Okay.
more flexible.
Well, the questions are just coming in left and right, so I'm gonna go
Okay.
next one. This next question is, what is the difference of culture in, or I guess the cultural difference in a federal position, the federal positions you've held versus your law firm or normal business or like nonprofit?
Wow. Well, first of all, when you're in government, people suck up to you a lot. And one thing that I think helped me keep my feet on the ground was the fact that, like, my parents weren't terribly impressed with what I was doing, and my kids, I was just their mom, so it kept me. And my mother, one of the things she would say to me is, stay humble. That's good and bad, but humility. And I think too many people get in positions of power and they forget to have humility to ask a question to get an answer, because no one knows everything, right? And then the humility to take an answer and go with it, from someone else, the humility to acknowledge, oh, that's a great idea. And I always hired people
Right.
smarter than me.
Right.
I didn't have that control in the other positions, big companies. I ended up with AT&T, very different culture, a lot
Oh,
of,
I can imagine.
the antibodies attacked. I was the first person who came in from the outside as an officer, and I was not welcomed. I thought I would be. I had been an FCC commissioner. I regulated that company. It was then SBC, became AT&T, and it was very, very tough. And I think, so the difference is the control. You're able to control your environment. I was able to bring in one person with me at the FCC. I got a staff as well, and wonderful, wonderful group of people. Although one of the, it's really funny that you just made me remember, one of the big lobbyists for a major company said to me, what are you trying to do? Hire a rainbow coalition? Because my chief was Black, I had an Asian man and a Jewish woman, right? So it never occurred to me. But the fact that this person thought that way, also, it's terrible that George Floyd happened and that he is dead. But I am so encouraged that so many people of so many different ethnicities and races are coming together and saying enough. And let's re-examine our culture that allows this to happen. And it was a life-changing event for me when my chief would call me he had been taken away by the police. This was in Washington. He was my chief legal at the FCC, and the police arrested him because he was Black. He didn't look anything like the man they were looking for. He walked out of his apartment coming to work, and he was arrested, and I had to go get him out. And life-changing for me to see, the sort of walking while Black or driving while Black, and how those things happen. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. Those are all relevant. Yeah.
yeah, well, because they form your heart and your mind and what you see, right? They also encouraged me to be more vocal and open
Right.
about what this country is capable of being.
Right.
And so I just think the lack of control, really, when you're in a company, and I think you're tested more to your character is tested more. I mean, there were instances, and I worked in 3 different companies. I worked in 3 different law firms and 3 different government positions, and you get tested in different ways. The one where I had more control over my response, and I didn't have to really kowtow to anybody, was in government. So I loved it. and
I'm
when
sure.
and when I was and then you got to do such good as when I was doing the human rights job. Oh my God. That was the most fulfilling job I will ever have professionally. Being a mom and raising hopefully sane and competent children is really much more important ultimately long term. But to be able to get people to out of jail or travel and try to ensure that human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was adhered to in other countries, just because I was American, and I was able to speak on behalf of this country. It was life-changing for me. It was life-changing. I say most places you get killed if you say something politically unpopular. Here, your reputation gets harmed, but
Right.
you may not get, hopefully. I mean, we do have
Right.
awful times, but that happens. But in the rest of the world, I mean, it's really, we are still fortunate, as difficult as it is today. We're still fortunate, really, that we're able to speak relatively freely.
I agree. Okay, well, I know we're coming close to the end, so I'm going to try and blaze through a couple questions real quick. So, first question: how have you brought your Hispanic heritage into your workplace persona? And second question is: are there any women leaders now that you are impressed with, and why?
Oh, wow. You don't leave, I've been very active in the Mexican American Bar Association, Latina National Network of Latina Hispanic Women. It was then. I've been all kinds. We call ourselves all kinds of different things. My mother hated when we went through the Chicana period, but because it means little, right? And I think, there's cultural things that I really will never lose. I sent my parents lived in New Mexico, and I would send my children back for the summers to be with my mom and dad, as much as it was difficult for me to let them go for, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. They loved it, but I also wanted them to know their roots. It's really important, I think, for them to know, how their mom grew up, how their grandparents grew up. The fact that my grandparents on both sides didn't speak English, even though they were born in New Mexico. But I wanted that identity to remain part of them. It's funny, my oldest daughter, let me kill this. My oldest came home from school.
Hi, Miss Dennis.
Sorry. I don't know how to stop that. Okay, there we go.
You're a popular person. It's okay.
No, I think it
Everyone
was
wants to
asking
talk to
for
you.
money. Asking for money. But she came home one day. I don't know, 6th or 7th grade. And she said, we had to identify today. And I said, we always, had dinner together as a family. And I said, well, what did you do? And she said, well, I didn't see anything that said 50-50. Her dad is Swedish ancestry and you're Mexican. She said, and there was no 50-50 there. But I saw this thing that said Native American. And I thought, well, I was born here, so I'm Native and I'm American. So she and a lot of her friends checked off Native American, the ones that were mixed culture, mixed ethnicity and race. And I thought, oh, the Educational Testing Service in Princeton's probably going wacky, but all these Native Americans in McLean, Virginia. But it's part of who I am. And, I love that I live in a city, San Antonio, that is so heavily Latino. And I will never, ever leave here. My heart found its home because I feel at home here. Where you hear Spanish, people see people who look like you, who have the same values and who care about their families. So that's never gone. I've had hard times in some work cultures because, at least in my era, they wanted you to act like the guys. I just never did that. I think women approach, and now men are also embracing it, like the inclusiveness and seeking other opinions. And it's not all top down, command and control kind of decision making. Consensus is real important. So I do think that a lot of the values that we bring, I hope that I've changed minds along the way. That's what I hope.
Well, thank you, Patricia. I really appreciate this. I feel like we could keep talking for hours.
We
or
can do that with your wife and my husband sometime.
yeah, that would be great. And I just want to say congratulations again. I know most people know, but you were named to the Latino Leaders Magazine 100 Most Influential Latinas in the country. So huge
That's
honor.
because of age, you know that. As you get to a certain age, you become more influential.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it. I can't wait for your book to come out, because I feel like that's gotta happen soon. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who was here to participate, and the questions that we got, they were great. And I think I'm going to hand it back over to Armin if he's here. I think there he is. There he is.
Hey,
All right.
what a
Patricia.
great interview, Wayne. In fact, you're so good that we are passing the $6,000 mark, which
Awesome.
Awesome.
actually that's it's going to be a little bit more with some other pledges. I do want to thank a few people who I think Patricia knows, and I think they have donated because of the segment. Of course, Samantha Scory, who's working behind the scenes, she has donated a few times already. A.B. Cruz.
Yay, AB, thank you. You know, AB and I met each other when I was an FCC commissioner. He was one of the ones who was very kind to me at the time, and he's remained kind. I'm teasing AB. He was a lawyer practicing communications law at the time.
I was reading, because he's moderating the program on race at 11, and I was reading his bio. For some reason, I didn't realize he was an attorney. I knew he was involved in so many things, but I didn't realize he had a law degree. Carla Brozovic, thank you for your donation. Linda Battles, thank you for supporting the World Affairs Council. Scott Sievers and Mr. Carlos Alvarez. Carlos Alvarez also supporting the council. He has always supported it. He made a very generous donation. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. STS Systems, which is where Scott Sievers works, is one of our sponsors. So he personally donated, and he had his company sponsor. And of course, thank you to Samantha for doing that. So we're at 6,900 right now.
That's
and
great.
actually it's 7,900 because of another pledge. So we are inching our way. The most we've raised before is not more than 2,500. So we're way past that. In fact, I may just go to sleep right now because we're done.
And Armin, I just want to personally, Wayne, thank you too for being so kind and generous with your time. But also, I'm so happy that you've been on board now almost a year and a half, Armin, and and you've done such a great job in keeping us together during this extraordinarily difficult time. So I just want to publicly thank you too, because you've really rejuvenated the World Affairs Council. So thank you for that. Because I think it's really important for us to remain the shining city on the hill and support democracy and rule of law and all the important basics of our country around the world, so people can be free.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate it, and I'm always thinking myself to be very blessed to be in the position I'm in, and I want to make sure that everyone who is watching and everyone who isn't watching who donates knows the importance of the World Affairs Councilors like you and I do, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. So
I'm going to record that and keep it for the tough time. So
that's right. That's right. Patricia, it's been great to hear from you, and thank you for being the second guest today. And I hope you could tune in for the rest of the day. We got some other vibrant programs coming along.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, Patricia, have a great day. See you tomorrow at the board meeting.
You got it. Bye.
All right, bye. All right. Samantha, are you there?
I am.
How are we doing on the social media front?
Doing pretty good. We got some people watching, got some people involved, got some great questions coming in. So I
Wonderful.
think we're doing great.
So we are,
Next
we're 20 minutes away. Can you come on screen for a few seconds? I know you like being behind the scene, but can you jump on really quick so that people could see who you
sure
are?
thing. I
Hey,
can take off my glasses. It does the craziest little reflection.
thank you, Samantha, for joining.
Hello.
I wanted everyone to meet you, not only because you just donated a couple times, but also because you were working behind the scenes all day and also leading up to everything that you're seeing today, the graphics, the messaging. Samantha's really, really made her niche in making sure that this goes smoothly, and so far so good. We've had a few technical issues, but that's been my fault. But I just wanted you to meet her. Now, you're originally from El Paso,
I am.
and what brought you to San Antonio?
I've been here about 8-ish years, I think. I came to do my undergrad at Trinity, and I've kind of stayed just because it's a very lovely place to be. I've formed a beautiful community. Also, I just got my master's at St. Mary's, so full circle, San Antonio, basically.
That's great. And what, now you were, prior to becoming employed with World Affairs Council, you were involved with us through other channels. What attracts you to what the World Affairs Council does?
Well, growing up on the border, I've definitely always had this very internationally minded perspective on the world. So coming to San Antonio and kind of falling into, like college friend groups and groups where we have a bunch of different interests, it's helped me grow a lot. But I've also been really interested in wanting to understand the world from this very international mindset. So joining the World Affairs Council and then doing the Young Professionals Group as well has been really helpful because I get to meet and talk and discuss things about what's going on in the world with people who also have these very internationally minded perspectives. So it just leads to great conversations, and it's not me just talking about the things I want to talk about to people who are semi-interested. It's people who are very invested in these same discussions.
Now I'm sure there's a lot people don't know about you, and I certainly don't know everything about you, but there's something that is fascinating, which is you are a Cold War enthusiast.
I am.
What?
I'm not subtle with it either.
You're not subtle about it, right? So what is it about the Cold War? What has ignited your interest about the Cold War?
There's just so many facets to it. So it's just a range of everything. Basically, every aspect of life was completely altered in the course of the Cold War. If you look at pop culture, it was completely changed. We got Russia being pegged as an enemy in basically every single context. We have movies in the 80s, fun movies in the 80s, like Rocky, where they made it political by making the enemy a Russian boxer. And that's even something small. It's just fascinating how this whole era permeated every single aspect and how we're still dealing with the consequences of it now.
In cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Rocky and
Absolutely.
Bullwinkle.
Which you know a lot about since your cats are named after the characters.
That's right. You want to go on video, Boris? Yeah, it doesn't seem like he does.
So there's just so much to the topic.
Yes.
You're never bored.
For sure.
Okay, and we have some of our next panelists jumping into this waiting room.
Okay. Well, we're about 15 minutes. I think Patricia says, oh no, that was an older message, I think. She's not trying to get in.
She's also in the waiting room, yes.
Oh, okay.
You want to let her back in?
Let's bring them all in.
All of them?
Just Patricia.
Okay.
Hi, Patricia. You're on live. Did you want to share something else?
No, I just wanted to listen to the folks who follow today, so I am.
Oh. Okay, perfect. All right. Samantha, why don't I'm going to play a quick video and then we could let Francisco in and the ambassador. Okay, let me see. You bear with me all here for a second. All right. Why don't we play this? We've got a lot of supporters in the community. Some of them are founders of the organization going back to 1982. And of course, we couldn't get everybody on, but there are a few people we could share with you who have made videos in the past. And that's what I will share before we start the 10 o'clock presentation. And let me do that in just a second here.
Let me say, when Doug Holland and I, a Republican, I'm a Democrat, formed this in 1982, the reason we did, San Antonio really was not an international city at that time. We knew that it had the opportunity to grow into one. So we got together, got a great board of directors. Marie Swartz worked full-time for no salary to get it going. And I think what we wanted to do then now is playing out today. And you cannot live in this world and not be an international city and not be involved in what's happening across the world. It's not, we don't have closed borders anymore. So the whole idea was to open up San Antonio to international development. And I think that's been its biggest benefit. I believe it was the year we started. I went to the airport and picked up a young man by the name of Carlos Salinas de Buquete. And he was the minister of the budget and planning, I think, at the time. And picked him up, he rode in the back seat, drove him there. We had a good long talk. He spoke in Spanish, although he could very well speak in English. The reason that's a memorial is that later on he becomes president of Mexico. He's the one that helped bring the signing of the NAFTA agreement here. He's the one that helped us get the North American Bank here in San Antonio and really put San Antonio on the international map in 1992.